Tappei has just released Arc 7 Chapter 28, and this video will be a summary of that chapter. I highly recommend you check out my Arc 7 Chapter 27 summary. Anyways, let's begin. The chapter begins with shock that Arakiya had escaped. We see that the person who shot at Jamal and Todd was Holly. We see that both Kuna and Holly apologize for letting them escape. We see that Kuna was providing assistance to Holly since Kuna has good eyes. Despite that though, Jamal was able to fend off the attacks and escape with arakiya. They explain how one person acted as bait, and that person was Jamal, whilst Todd snuck in and procured arakiya. They speculate on chasing after them. However, they were actually interrupted by two voices at the same time. This came from both Abel and Priscilla. Priscilla closed her eyes, allowing Abel to continue. Abel talks about how a small strike force was able to get arakiya and then escape. A small force can achieve that providing they have their own discrete goals. Abel continues, stating that even if someone like Kuna or Holly chased after them, after a small duration of time, such as half a day, arakiya will recover, meaning that anyone chasing after them would be a lost cause because they wouldn't be able to fight arakiya with their current strength. Kuna was disappointed, but Holly essentially agreed that Abel was correct. Subaru didn't like the way Abel put it, but he also agreed with Abel. The people who rescued arakiya had a plan and a way to escape. Chasing after people like that would be meaningless. Priscilla made a comment that arakiya's fate was still undecided considering she escaped, meaning Priscilla still has a role to play in the future, according to her. Subaru had mixed feelings about arakiya's escape, however Priscilla's feelings on the matter could not be deciphered. Al asked Subaru what they should do since arakiya escaped. Subaru is unsure. Subaru specializes in surprise attacks. If Kuna and Holly couldn't do anything, and he was even worse when it came to strength than Kuna and Holly, it was pretty much over. There was nothing that Subaru could do. The idea was brought up that maybe the people who rescued arakiya pretended to escape, and they were actually hiding in the city. Zika Ottoman talked about how all of the loopholes in the city were crushed before the arrival of Subaru and the group. However, it was speculated that maybe the person who rescued arakiya was a part of the loophole destruction squad. Therefore, the people that rescued arakiya were an expert when it came to the city of Guaral and would know how to get in or out of the city. Subaru checks in on Holly's condition. She's beaten up, but otherwise she's perfectly fine. We see that Subaru then goes on to ask about the number of people who died, and we see that it totals 7 people. Subaru was actually upset about this and he considered himself a fraud, even if no one else would blame him. He made a plan to achieve a victory without spilling blood, yet 7 people died. As Subaru muttered to himself about the bloodless castle plan, Priscilla overheard him and questioned him on whether or not he could actually take over the city without anyone dying. Subaru apologized for failing regardless, but Priscilla was more surprised at the plan and asked if Abel was out of his mind for giving the go-ahead on the plan. Abel confirmed that the plan was crazy. However, despite that, Abel for some reason carried it out even though he knew it was crazy. This is something that Priscilla did not understand. Despite that though, Abel continued and stated that if it wasn't for arakiya's involvement, the plan would have been bloodless. And he made it clear to Priscilla to not berate Subaru, as Subaru is his strategist, and that if there's any blame, you would have to blame Abel for giving the plan the go-ahead. Subaru was shocked since Vincent essentially defended him, and now Subaru was somehow a military strategist. Al joked that Subaru got a promotion. However, Subaru said he's contracted to Beatrice and he's Emilia's knight, so he doesn't need any more positions. Al continues stating that you can't save everyone, so don't try and feel bad, because if you try and save everyone, you will fail and then your heart will be broken. Al continues stating that life isn't a game. People will live and die alone. Deep down, Subaru knew it was the truth. You couldn't save everyone. But this was war, and one choice could save tens or hundreds of people. Priscilla pulled her fan out of her cleavage and pointed it at the city, asking if they could use the same trick to beat Arakiya again in the future, but Priscilla was told that it wouldn't work again. There was a point in the fight where Arakiya was acting strangely. That was the point where Al attacked her and shattered her elbow. It's explained that arakiya is a spirit eater, someone who can eat spirits and then use the power of those spirits. Subaru states he wouldn't bring Beatrice into this and asks if spirit eaters are common. It's explained that it's a technique belonging to a hidden tribe. However, it was a powerful technique which led to the tribe's extinction. There are no other spirit eaters that are known. Subaru was actually happy to hear this, because after all that means that Beatrice wouldn't get eaten. We find out that arakiya was mana sick. When people who are sensitive to mana go into an area where there's a high concentration of mana, it can actually cause them to become mana sick. Abel talked about using his treasure, but Subaru was confused. Abel talked about the ring that Subaru used to break the Elgina's horn during the Blood Life ritual. In that fight, the ring shattered. Abel explains that when he dropped the balcony, it actually crushed a similar ring which released mana. However, it would actually take time for the mana to accumulate and be released over time. And then when the mana built up over time, it affected arakiya, and that's when Al went in for the killing blow. This of course meant that Abel had expected arakiya to turn on him at some point, which was stated by Priscilla, hence why he had the ring. Abel explains that it's natural to have countermeasures for people close to you. He just didn't know exactly when arakiya would turn on him. However, preparing mana stones or magical items like that would take a long time to try the same trick again. In other words, they need a decent fighting force instead next time arakiya appears. Despite this, Priscilla stated that Abel currently isn't doing good enough for her to convince her collaborators to assist him. By the way, when Priscilla refers to her collaborators, I'm assuming she's referring to Selena Dracoi. Anyways, this shocked Subaru, who again wondered what Al and Priscilla's purpose for being in Valakia was. Subaru asked her to be honest because he doesn't know how to think of her, but Priscilla says that she doesn't care what people think. After all, and then Subaru finishes her sentence with her standard, "After all, the world revolves around me" pitch. With that, Priscilla closed one eye and stated that she wants to restore Abel to the throne, or else she will have a stream of unwanted visitors. Abel stated that he didn't send the assassins to Priscilla's domain. If you're confused about this, I highly recommend you check out my summaries for Declaration of War and Shadows of Conspiracy to refer to what actually happened. Priscilla believes Abel, but stated she let the wings carry her here to Valakia. Subaru wondered if Al and Priscilla can fly, to which Subaru was informed of flying dragons. Priscilla jumped down from above from the flying dragons, but Al had to actually wait because he can't jump from big heights, and that's when Priscilla jumped down to block arakiya's attack. With that, Subaru realized this collaborator of Priscilla's is a big enough person to get people flying dragons to use. Priscilla berates and compliments Subaru's intelligence and then goes on to tell him to fix up his makeup. Subaru ponders about the fact that he's still dressed as Natsumi. Subaru then states that Priscilla and him are on the same side and they should cooperate. However, Priscilla stated that if Abel doesn't have the qualities of an emperor, then she cannot help. Abel glared at Priscilla. Everything went back to the idea of the bloodless castle plan. It didn't really matter if the plan failed or succeeded. The problem was the fact that Abel gave it the go-ahead and went along with the plan. Despite that, Abel with passion stated he will reclaim the throne regardless. Everyone turned to see how Priscilla would respond. She stated that although Abel's spirit was not broken, in reality he was ousted from the throne. The next question is to figure out who was behind it. Abel surmises it was the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister of Wallachia is essentially the number 2 person in charge. We see that Chisha Gold also had a hand in the betrayal alongside the 9 divine generals. So essentially everyone is against Abel. Subaru asks why Abel doesn't just reveal that he's hiding and he was ousted, so that way the populace will rise against the fake emperor. However, Al shuts him down and Abel continues, stating that Wallachia is where the powerful is respected, and if Abel came out and did that, he wouldn't get respect. Despite that, Abel proclaimed he will take back what's taken from him, referring to his country and the throne. Abel proclaimed he knew what to do. He stood up and he asked Zikl Ottoman for a map. A world map showing the entire world. Each city on the map had its own fighting force. You could capture each city and add their own force to your own. However, Subaru wasn't that optimistic about that idea because if it was a simulation game, they would get a game over. However, Abel said that the chance to win was to actually get the 9 divine generals on their side. The 9 divine generals represent power. If you unite yourself with them, you will rule the empire. We then get a list of the 9 divine generals. Securing all 9 is the victory condition, and with that the chapter ends. Wow, this chapter was really hard to read on detail, but honestly we now have confirmation that the Prime Minister and the 9 divine generals have rebelled, and essentially now we're playing Pokemon to capture the 9 legendary divine generals to get them on our team. Honestly, I feel like with Priscilla's help, Arakiya can easily come back to Priscilla's side and Abel's side. I believe Cecilis will come back if he's sort of like promised a way to fight Reinhard again or something like that. You know, because Cecilis pursues the heavenly sword. Honestly, like, the chapter was weird. It was too much talking, nothing much really happened. We saw how Arakiya was beaten by mana sickness. Honestly, nothing much happened. That's pretty much it. And I'll see you guys next time.